And good morning, I'm Jerry Revish. Thanks for spending part of your morning with us on Face the State. Scott's enjoying the week off, but that's not stopping the political discussion. And before we get to our guests, let's get a check on your headlines today. We're getting a fresh look at poverty in the Buckeye State this week. For the count ending in 2015, nearly 15% of the state's population lived below the federal poverty line. The good news? That's down more than 16% from 2011. But state officials also highlight that grandparents are now taking care of grandchildren more and entering poverty as a result. Officials say the heroin epidemic is increasing that number rapidly as more drug-addicted parents become unable to take care of their children. The Ohio Republican Party has a new political director. Max Doxey was appointed to the position early last week. Republican leadership says Doxey has a track record of success in the Buckeye State, especially during the 2016 election cycle. Doxey most recently served as a regional political coordinator in the White House. A Columbus man with a history of assaulting women in public is prompting an effort to change a state law. Lonnie Sturdivant has been convicted 10 times of groping women. He does his jail time, he gets out, and then he does it again. Well, under Ohio law, his crime of sexual imposition is just a misdemeanor. But State Representative Jim Hughes drafted legislation that would double the possible jail time after a third conviction. This week, it's going through committee. It has the support of several state organizations and the Attorney General's office. And we have a great panel of guests with us this morning, so let's introduce them right now. Returning this week, Republican strategist Terry Casey, who also sat on the Franklin County Board of Elections for more than a dozen years. State Senator Charleta Tavares, whose district covers part of Franklin County, also returns this week. Aside from representing Central Ohio, she also serves as Senate Assistant Minority Leader. We're pleased to welcome Columbus City Council member Mike Stenziano also to the panel this week. And we also welcome Chrissie Thompson to our panel. She's the Capitol Bureau Chief for the Cincinnati Enquirer. Welcome to all. Thank you for being with us today. So we want to start this week looking at a very timely issue, gun safety rights here in Ohio. Tragedy struck in Cincinnati last week, as we all know, where people were expecting a fun evening. One person was shot to death, 17 others wounded inside the Cameo Nightclub in Cincinnati. It is a scene described simply as chaotic by police and first responders. The nightclub bans weapons of any kind and employs both security and off-duty police to keep everyone safe, but guns still got inside. Chrissie, Cincinnati's your bailiwick. What do you think that club needed that night that it didn't have?
You know, they supposedly had people who were wanding to as a security precaution, and the guns still got in. We also have reports from some people at the nightclub saying that they weren't wanded. They didn't see any of this happening. So there's a lot of conflicting reports. We don't appear to have any good camera footage, although the nightclub said that they had camera footage in place, so it's kind of unclear what was going on there. But it seems as though the security going into the club was lax on some level, and again, conflicting reports on what they even had in place.
Yeah, Mike, here in the city of Columbus, what sort of policy matters, guidelines has City Council put out for these clubs as far as guns?
So obviously safety of anyone going out to having a good time is important. We work and have special officers work and coordinate with the owners of the different establishments, but we're kind of at the whim of the legislature and what legislation they're going to put forward in terms of what cities' rights could be. We've seen a lot of changes in the last few years, and so we continue to adjust as the environment at the state level adjusts as well.
Well, let's talk to our state rep about all of that. How do you feel about this?
Senator.
Thank you very much,
Yes.
Terry. I certainly feel that we shouldn't have guns in any kind of establishment. There were off-duty police officers who were on assignment at the club at the time. There were private security personnel that were on assignment at the time, and we still couldn't prevent this tragedy from taking place. Having more guns in the facility, I don't think would have addressed this shooting of this one person and then the injuring of 17 others. I think certainly if the wand didn't work, They should make sure that they have those kinds of facilities in place and that it's consistent, not haphazard. And then cameras would have certainly helped to ensure that everyone was wand or whisked with a wand as they went in.
Well, Terry, it looks like the legislature is responding to the will, the desire of the people when it comes to having these weapons out.
Well, I talked to Ron O'Brien, who's the prosecutor in what is now Ohio's largest county. Remember, recently Franklin County just passed Cuyahoga County. And really the concealed carry laws that the legislature has done, if you look at the detail of it, they've given the right to universities, certain other people to say, no, you can't have them. So it still gives them the option of prohibiting. But the difficulty is whether the lawmakers are Democrat or Republican. You could write the best law in the world, but management, the people at clubs, they need to be responsible, and it seems like that was the breakdown in terms of, sadly, what happened in Cincinnati.
Now, Governor John Kasich weighed in on the shooting right after it happened. Here's what he had to say.
But as the father of two 17-year-old girls going to be headed to college next year, you know, you see things like this and you begin to wonder, where is it safe to go? And obviously terrible, a loss of one life and a number of people wounded. We're just going to keep our eyes on this, and I've offered of course, all state assistance that is needed.
Now, in response to incidents like this, Ohio has examined gun laws, but last month just passed a bill allowing concealed weapons in more places. Senate Bill 199 allows guns in child care centers. It allows people to keep guns and bullets in their vehicles at work. Permit holders can also take firearms into non-secure areas of airports like check-in areas and some baggage claims. Even certain college campuses are now allowing guns. Ohio State University prohibits carrying concealed weapons on campus, but there are some campuses that I guess it's up to them whether they want to have that or not.
Yeah, there's some campuses that have said that they're considering it. I think generally we're probably going to see universities stick with the strictest prohibition they're able to have, but some of these campuses that are in that maybe aren't as closed and designated of an area like an Ohio Wesleyan is a pretty defined area. It's a small campus. Some of these more sprawling urban public campuses we may see consider that. Some of our regional comprehensive universities in the state have said they would think about it. So generally speaking, liability-wise, again, I think we're going to see universities generally saying, no, we don't want this on our campus.
Now, as it is now, if you have a weapon in your car, you've got to announce that. You've got to tell, if a police officer stops you, you've got to tell them, officer, I do have a weapon in my car.
That's right.
Right?
Yes. So there's a bill in the legislature that was just introduced, I believe, a week ago with several Republicans supporting it, where if you were pulled over by a police officer, if this bill were to pass, you would not have to say, I have a concealed carry permit and I have a gun in my car. Right now you have to do that. Folks say it's just a hassle, and if you're driving the car that you're registered to, when they run your plate, they'll see that you have a license. So again, this is just another tweak that may I mean, there are a lot of Republicans signed on to it, right? So we have seen a lot of these bills passed that lift restrictions for concealed carry holders, and so if this were to gain support, I imagine it could move pretty quickly through our Republican-backed legislature.
But generally, a lot of the legislators, if the groups like the FOP, like prosecutors, are opposed to some changes, it's not automatic, but that causes the legislature to think really hard and wonder, is this going to be the best idea? So, I mean, that's part of the good thing about the legislative process is we got 132 members and they just can't snap their fingers and it goes through one house and it's done. So that's part of the debate, and also people want to look at, have concealed carry people with permits. Are they the cause of the bad problems, or is it somebody else? So people want to know what has been the problem, what's caused it, how do you solve it?
But on that point, Senate Bill 199, which opened up more facilities that you're able to have concealed weapons in, including daycares, et cetera, that passed without the Police Chiefs Association support or the Prosecutors Association support. That was done in lame duck session, which is, you know, that scurry to pass bills in the last days, minutes of the General Assembly. and it doesn't give many the opportunity to come in and weigh in one way or the other.
Mike, what changes would you like to see here?
So to Terry's point, it has been an opt-in proposal. I've got 2 kids in daycare, and I talked to the owner, and I think she thought I was a little off when I was asking about what do you think about individuals bringing guns to the center. It's an important discussion, but it is one that we continue to see get changed every General Assembly. There's at least 1, 2, maybe even 3 bills. Started with guns and bars and allowing people to carry into liquor establishments. You weren't allowed to drink, and now we're seeing this broadening. And so that constant chipping away into what problem are we really trying to solve, I think is a bigger discussion with the FOP, with the Sheriff's Association, just making sure that all voices are heard and we're doing something that makes some common sense.
And a record number of gun permits now being asked for. Is this a response to perceived danger out there, or people just arming themselves because they're trying to get safe, or what?
Well, there's worries out there. Also, we have to remember in Ohio, we might live in Columbus, a metropolitan area with a lot of suburbs, but when you get into counties like Vinton County, Monroe County, which maybe only have 12,000 people, they might at the most have 1 deputy and 1 cruiser on patrol at any time. So in rural counties, it's a different safety circumstance than, say, in an area like Columbus. And that's part of the challenge for the legislature, is we are a big, diverse state.
To be continued. The city of Columbus takes a stand for the LGBT community. Still ahead this morning, the new protections approved by Columbus City Council and how the community is responding. And welcome back. This week, the city of Columbus took what many call a stand for the young LGBTQ community. Columbus is officially against conversion therapy for minors. Now, it's therapy that tries to change someone's gender identity or sexual orientation from homosexual to heterosexual. And we've got our panel here to discuss all that. Mike, this came out of City Council. Tell me the thinking about that.
So Council President Zach Klein brought forward the legislation and managed it through our process. We were being proactive. We know there's a vulnerable population. Our LGBTQ youth in particular face significant challenges, and when individuals and statistics of conversion therapy get introduced, the results are very tragic. And so working on behalf of our residents, our constituents, Council, as you mentioned, took a very supportive stance following the lead of some other cities as well, and unanimously supporting a ban of conversion therapy.
What type of facilities practice this?
So it has been kind of a gambit of where does it exist? Is it a parent contacting a doctor and a doctor does that? Is it religious directed? We didn't have any opposing testimony. It was really some individuals who had those experiences that really spoke up about just how it made them feel, the depression they felt, the suicidal thoughts that they had. A few years ago, we had an incident in Cincinnati, unfortunately, where a young woman took her life, and it was based on her experience with conversion therapy. And so by banning this practice, although exempting out religious institutions because of constitutional law, we again are protecting this very vulnerable population of our city.
Well, I guess my concern is, and I'm hardly going to defend because it seems like pretty much quack science, if there's any science at all in it, but it seems like a little bit, to pick up your phrase earlier, it's a solution in search of a problem, because I don't think we've had this year or last year any problems, and I wish City Council would focus more on the tax abatements they give out, the murder rate in Columbus, which is about 2.5 times what New York and LA is. So it sounds good to a constituency, but I wish Council focus on some more important issues.
I don't remember using that phrase today or before, but the support's been overwhelming. Very few pieces of legislation do we get that we have nothing but proponents. Understanding the important role of protecting this vulnerable population with groups like Kaleidoscope, with groups like Equality Ohio.
But isn't bullying the bigger problem for these vulnerable kids?
I think it ranges, and I think we know when individuals are introduced to conversion therapy, and I know Senator Tavares can speak to some of her experience in the healthcare field.
Talk to us about that.
Well, I've introduced the bill. This will be the 3rd General Assembly that I've introduced prohibiting conversion therapy in the state of Ohio. In this last session, we had a number of organizations come out in support of the bill because what we are fearful of is we're going to continue to increase the suicide rate and depression rate amongst the LGBTQ community. Parents, in many cases, are searching out these quacks. It's not a proven science, and in fact, all of the health organizations have come out in opposition. But there are some people that are practicing this. We're trying to help and to ensure that we're saving lives as opposed to having children go through this therapy and believe that there's something wrong with them, that there is something that needs to be fixed.
Chrissie, what's been the climate in Cincinnati?
Yeah, so Cincinnati was the first city outside of Washington, D.C. To ban conversion therapy, and they did it at the end of 2015. And it was really interesting that you said there were no opponents here in Columbus. Cincinnati had several people speak in opposition to the measure. There are a few conservative groups that are headquartered down there that spoke out against it. I think it's important to note that this is for licensed medical therapists. Mm-hmm. So any of these groups that are licensed counselors or psychologists or psychiatrists or things like that, they wouldn't be practicing this. There are church-trained folks who do counseling at their churches and aren't licensed, and these sorts of bans don't apply to those people. And sometimes we do see therapies, sort of like the one that Leila Alcorn went through in Cincinnati, that are attempting to change this sexual orientation. So those aren't prohibited by this, and that's where we do see this happening.
And Jerry, just to be clear, I mean, this is a problem, but I think the bigger problem is the bullying, because young people are very vulnerable in what kids do to kids in school, what they put on Facebook. There's been a lot of suicides in schools, and bullying, I think, is the bigger problem that needs to be addressed.
But this is a parent that is generally subjecting their young person to this so-called therapy. It's not the bullying, it's your parent that goes to why those young people are even more depressed and in some cases take their lives.
And it's a move that Stonewall Columbus is applauding. Take a listen.
I think what it says is that, you know, when you go to school and you identify as LGBT and you're getting bullied every day and nobody wants you and nobody likes you and you're getting a lot of harassment and you may be even getting that at home, that at least your city stands up for you.
And of course, the other big conversation this week is what's next for health care.
We're in the United States of America. It is not acceptable that there are people who live inside the United States of America who can't get health care. That's ridiculous. Because you know what? It could be your family. So somebody's got to fight for these folks, and we can do it in a way that's responsible, that can accomplish what we want, but we're going to have to work together to get it done.
So far, Ohio has not made it clear, but Congress and the White House continue their debate on this. What happened to this repeal and replace crusade this past week?
Well, it's still dangling out there, but I think the biggest news on Thursday of this past week was Donald Trump kind of going on the attack on the Freedom Caucus and Jim Jordan, the congressman from Ohio. So clearly there's a lot of dynamics, and I might mention, a lot of people forget, it wasn't until March 23rd, 2010, more than a year after he became president and the Democrats had big control the Senate and House, before Obamacare got passed. So health care then, and even today, you don't get it fixed in 100 days because it's too big, it's too complex.
You would think with these many years of resistance to Obamacare, as it's called, that the Republican Party would have been ready with a remedy that didn't have these sort of hurdles and pitfalls in it that this bill presented.
I totally agree with that remark, Jerry, because it has been a fight for the last 7 years, from 2010 on. And so if you said your first act as president, and when the new Congress comes in, is going to be to repeal and replace, then you should have had the plan to do that. But 7 years, 64 attempts to undo the Affordable Care Act, and that was part of the strategy. Confuse people and make them believe that the Affordable Care Act was different than what was dubbed Obamacare. It is, in fact, the same thing. But the people finally woke up and started seeing that the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare were one and the same.
Were you getting calls about this push by Republicans to repeal and replace?
Not trickling at the local level. I think there were some questions of how is this going to impact our families, how is this going to impact the care. I mean, there were a lot of moving pieces, a lot of rumor, unnamed sources saying this is in, this is out, all the way up into when they decided they weren't going to go forward with the vote. You know, the part that I've seen kind of a little troubling, and the senator spoke to it, was hearing the Speaker Ryan say, you know, we are no longer the opposition party, we now have to be the governing party. When you're the majority, you know, you have a responsibility to govern, look out for your voters, your constituents. And so as troubled as you've been, and then some of the rhetoric also this week of we need to just continue to focus only with Republicans and not work in a bipartisan manner. Healthcare shouldn't be a partisan issue.
Well, and that was one of the problems if you look at 93 and 94 when Hillary tried to push her health care plan, which crashed and burned and resulted in the change in control of the Congress. Then obviously after 09 and 10, the control of the House changed. This is a volatile issue because in America, just, and Ohio is a good example, what works in a rural area and what works in an urban area like Columbus or Cleveland are very different because the number of hospitals, healthcare providers you have, it is really challenging and complex to solve.
All right. Thanks so much for being here with us today. We've got to move ahead here. Still ahead this morning, staying in touch. The news service helping you do just that with your lawmakers and why some say it's going too far. Think about this for a moment. When was the last time you picked up the phone and actually had a conversation? Dial the phone number to talk. No texting, emailing, or tweeting, just a real conversation. Well, in this political climate, maybe your last actual call was to a lawmaker. Now technology is changing that too. In the spotlight this morning, staying in touch in America. Take a look at this new service. It's an app called Stance. You record your message to lawmakers. The app does the rest, contacting the office until your message is delivered. Facebook just unveiled a similar service called Town Hall. It allows users to locate and contact representatives right from the computer. But does this really mean you are delivering your message personally? Users say they wish they could call lawmakers themselves if it was quick. According to CNN, the average wait time when you call is 30 minutes. And in this instant age, does anybody have that long to wait? Does it matter if it's for democracy? Now, before you take the easy way out, remember this: Stance messages are not private. This app publishes every recording on its site, your contact information too. They also publicly tweet your message to the congressperson's Twitter handle. We want to hear what you think about that. Does this count as getting in touch? Join our conversation on social media. And remember, if it affects you and your family and Ohio, we're here to make sure those accountable face the state. Have a great day.